Parker Maddox didn't think he just moved, lunging between the man and the woman in the alley behind the grocery store with nothing but instinct and fury. "Hey. You don't touch her." The man, some drunk in a wrinkled blazer, reeked of entitlement and whiskey as he shoved the woman against a dumpster, his voice slurring threats. But the second Parker grabbed his arm and yanked him back, the guy stumbled. "Back off," Parker growled, fists clenched. Now, the guy tried to swing. Bad move. One punch later, he was on the pavement, groaning. The woman's breath came fast. Her expensive coat was torn at the shoulder, her hair a mess of glossy waves, but her eyes wide, bright, and furious, locked with Parker's. He took a step back, checking her. "Are you okay?" She nodded slowly. "Yeah, thank you, seriously," Parker exhaled, running a hand through his messy hair. His knuckles burned from the punch. "You shouldn't be walking around here alone. That guy could've," he stopped himself. "You're lucky I was here," she blinked. "I'm not usually. My driver dropped me off at the wrong place." "Driver," he glanced at her again. She didn't look like someone from around here. Her coat probably cost more than his monthly rent, but kindness didn't discriminate and neither did trouble. "I'm Olivia Langston," she said, offering her hand like they were at some cocktail party and not standing next to a dumpster. He hesitated, wiping his hand on his jeans before shaking hers. Parker Maddox." "Thank you, Parker." "Really?" He nodded, glancing back toward his beat-up pickup parked by the curb. "Come on, I'll walk you to your car or whatever. It's not safe around here." She hesitated for a second, then followed him. "So," he said after a long silence, "you're not from this side of town, are you?" "Definitely not," she said with a dry laugh. "I was supposed to meet someone near the park, but I got turned around. My driver dropped me 3 blocks off and then my phone died. I was trying to get to the main street." They reached the edge of the alley. His daughter's daycare was just across the street and he checked his watch. He had 5 minutes to pick up Emmy. He turned to her. "You'll be okay from here. Main Street's just 2 blocks that way." "Plenty of cabs." She tilted her head. "Are you always this helpful to strangers?" He shrugged. "Only the ones getting shoved around by creeps." Then, without waiting for a reply, he crossed the street. Inside the daycare, Emmy ran to him, arms flung wide. "Daddy," he scooped her up. "Hey, bug. You ready to go home?" "Yep." Her curly hair bounced as she clung to him. Outside, he buckled her into the car seat in the back of his rusty truck, which coughed awake after a second try. He didn't notice the pair of eyes watching from the sidewalk. Olivia stood there, her brows raised, lips parted. "You have a daughter?" she asked, stepping toward them. "Yeah," he said, one hand on the door. "This is Emmy." Emmy waved. "Hi," Olivia smiled, something soft flickering in her eyes. "She's adorable." "Thanks." He straightened. "Listen, I gotta get her home, but I'm glad you're okay." She nodded again, slower this time. "So am I." He climbed into the truck and drove away, not knowing Olivia Langston, heiress to the Langston real estate empire, Manhattan's hidden millionaire and owner of 3 downtown high-rises, was still watching him, heart pounding for reasons she didn't fully understand yet. The next day, Olivia couldn't stop thinking about him. She sat in her penthouse apartment, staring out at the skyline, Parker's voice echoing through her mind. He was rough around the edges, but kind, protective, real. She couldn't remember the last time a man stepped in for her without knowing who she was or what she was worth. Most men saw her name and turned into salesmen, hungry for her money, her last name, or her connections. But Parker hadn't asked her for anything. He didn't even try to impress her. She picked up her assistant's file again. She'd asked for a background check not because she didn't trust him, but because she needed to know Parker Maddox. Age, 31, occupation, construction, currently working freelance under a subcontractor, single father. Lives in a 2-bedroom rental in Queens, no criminal record. Military background, honorably discharged. She closed the file. The next day, she took a car to the same alley. He wasn't there. Then again, she didn't expect him to be, so she returned the day after that and the one after that. On the 3rd day, she struck gold. She spotted him on a construction site near the corner. He was in a white tank top, his muscular arms dusted with sweat and dirt, hammering something into a wooden frame. Emmy sat nearby in a folding chair, sipping from a juice box and coloring. She stepped closer. "Hi," she said. Parker glanced up, surprised. "You again?" I owe you more than just a thank you, he shook his head. You don't owe me anything. Well, I brought coffee anyway. He stared at the cup she offered, then took it. She sat on the cooler next to him. So, you bring your daughter to work, he grinned. When I can't afford the sitter, she's a good kid, just sits and draws. Olivia glanced at Emmy, who looked up and waved. I like your sparkly shoes, Emmy said. Olivia laughed. Thanks. I like your sparkly headband. Parker watched them, brow furrowed. Why are you here? She shrugged. Curious, you saved me and you didn't even ask who I was. I didn't need to. She tilted her head. Don't you want to know? No, he said simply. I'm not sure I'd like you better if I knew. That stunned her. Not in a bad way, but in a way that made her chest ache. People always wanted to know. Always wanted something, but not Parker. And that's when Olivia Langston knew she was in trouble. Because she hadn't stopped thinking about him since the alley, and she wasn't planning on stopping now. Parker didn't see Olivia again for 3 days, not until she walked straight onto the construction site like she had every right to be there, wearing work boots that were clearly new and jeans that had never touched dust until now. You're going to roll an ankle in those, he said, nodding at the boots as he tightened a bolt on the scaffolding. I Googled what to wear, she replied, stepping around a coil of wire. Apparently this is standard construction chic. He let out a short breath. What are you doing here? I brought lunch. She held up a brown paper bag like it was a peace offering. For you and Emmy, I remembered you said you didn't like sandwiches with soggy lettuce. I never said that. You didn't have to, she said, handing the bag to him. I guessed. He took it reluctantly. You know, most people would have said thank you and moved on. I've never been great at doing what most people do. Emmy tugged on his sleeve from behind. Can we eat now? Yeah, bug, he said, crouching to brush the dust off a nearby step. Let's sit here. The three of them sat against the base of the frame he was working on, the metal cool against their backs. Olivia handed Emmy a juice pouch and a container of strawberries, then passed Parker a wrapped sandwich, neatly labeled with a marker. Turkey, no onions, she said. He raised an eyebrow. You're starting to learn too much. That's the idea, she replied, brushing a speck of sawdust off her jeans. Emmy leaned toward Olivia, her voice low. Do you have any pets? Olivia blinked. I have a cat named Cosmo. He's kind of moody. Emmy giggled. Our neighbor has a dog that barks at trucks. He's not very smart. Parker wiped his hands on his jeans and stood. I've got to finish before the rain hits. You too good here, Olivia nodded. We'll stay out of the way. He climbed back up the framework, glancing down occasionally to make sure his daughter wasn't wandering. But his eyes kept drifting to Olivia, her knees tucked under her, her hair pulled into a loose braid, her attention focused entirely on Emmy, who was now showing her how to draw a flower with a crayon. It was disarming. He'd expected her to hand him a thank you card and disappear. Instead, she kept showing up, like she wasn't done with whatever this was. And he couldn't tell if that scared him or intrigued him more. Later that evening, after the crew packed up and Emmy was fast asleep in the back seat, Parker leaned against the open door of his truck as Olivia stood beside him, arms crossed. You could have had your assistant drop off lunch, he said. I could have, she replied. But then I wouldn't have gotten to hear about Emmy's very serious opinions on bananas, he chuckled. She's a tough critic. Olivia hesitated. You're good with her. She's easy to love, he said, glancing through the window at Emmy's sleeping face. Takes after her mom. Olivia looked over at him. She's not around, he shook his head. She passed when Emmy was 2, car accident. A silence settled between them, not heavy, just respectful. She's lucky to have you, Olivia finally said. He shrugged. I do what I can. You do more than that. Parker looked at her then, really looked. Why are you here, Olivia? She didn't answer right away. Because I don't know what to do with you, he raised an eyebrow. You don't ask anything of me. You don't try to get close to my world, whatever that means. You just exist, and it's refreshing and maddening. He tilted his head. You want me to ask for something? No, she said softly. I want you to keep being exactly who you are. And I want to see what happens if I keep showing up. Parker didn't move, didn't blink, just stared at her like she'd said something he wasn't sure he had the right to believe. You really don't know what you're doing, do you? He asked. Not a clue, he nodded once. Then I guess we'll figure it out. She stepped back, opening the door to her car. Same time tomorrow, he didn't answer. Just watched her go, heart thudding with something he hadn't felt in years. The next afternoon, Olivia was waiting by the truck before he even unbuckled Emmy's seat. "I need a favor," she said, not bothering with hello. He frowned. "What kind of favor?" "There's a gala tomorrow night. I'm expected to be there. I'd rather not go alone." "I don't own a suit. I'll take care of that." He crossed his arms. "I'm not a prop. I'm not treating you like one." He studied her. "Why me?" "Because I trust you," she said. "And I need someone real in that room. Those people, they eat weakness. You're the only person I've met who doesn't pretend." He didn't answer right away. "Just opened the truck door and lifted Emmy out. She stays with my neighbor tomorrow night," he said finally. "She likes spaghetti and bedtime stories." Olivia smiled. "Noted." As she walked away, Parker stared at the spot where she'd been, wondering how the hell a woman like that had managed to turn his life upside down without even trying. Olivia stood in the center of her walk-in closet, surrounded by gowns that had walked red carpets and graced magazine covers, yet none of them felt right. She didn't want to impress a room full of men who called her father by his first name. She wanted to walk into that ballroom and see Parker look at her like she wasn't some carefully curated image, but like a woman who meant something to him. She settled on a midnight blue dress with clean lines and a low back. Simple, elegant, no embellishments, just her. At exactly 7:30, Parker stepped out of the black car she'd sent for him, wearing a tailored charcoal suit and a quiet expression that didn't belong to someone used to events like these. He adjusted the collar of his shirt as he stepped into the Langston family's private lobby and nodded at the doorman, who blinked twice before opening the glass doors. The elevator opened directly into Olivia's penthouse. "You clean up fast," she said, taking him in. "You didn't give me much choice." She reached for his collar and fixed the lapel. "You look like you belong in every room you walk into, you know that." "I don't," he said. "But thanks." She handed him a slim silver card. "This gets us past the press line." "My name's not on the guest list this year. I'm keeping things quiet." He glanced at her. "Why?" "Because I'm tired of being the story." As they stepped into the waiting town car, Parker leaned back against the smooth leather seat, his eyes scanning the streets outside. Olivia watched him, her fingers resting lightly on the satin clutch in her lap. "Have you ever been to an event like this?" she asked. "No," he said. "But I've worked the valet at a few, watched people walk in wearing half my rent on their wrists." She didn't laugh. "You're going to hate it, probably. But I'm glad you're here," she said quietly. The gala was held in a historic hotel ballroom, its chandeliers dripping with crystals and its parquet floor polished to a mirror shine. Waiters carried trays of champagne and foie gras. Guests floated by in gowns and tuxedos, all of them wearing the same kind of smile, polite but hollow. As soon as they stepped inside, a woman with silver blonde hair and a diamond choker approached. "Olivia Langston," she said. "I should have known you'd make an entrance." Olivia gave a tight nod. "Marla, and who's this?" Marla's eyes flicked to Parker, assessing. Parker offered a handshake. "Parker Maddox." Marla's lips curved slightly. "Ah, and what do you do, Mr. Maddox?" "I build things," he said. There was a pause. "Lovely," Marla said, turning her attention back to Olivia. "I'm sure your father would be fascinated." "He's not here," Olivia replied, "and neither is his approval." Marla's smile dimmed as she walked away. Parker leaned in slightly. "Do they always talk like that? Only when they smell fresh blood? I'm starting to think you brought me as bait." "I brought you so I wouldn't have to face them alone." He looked at her. "You don't seem like someone who's afraid of people." "I'm not afraid of them," she said. "I'm just tired of pretending I care what they think." They made their way through the crowd. Olivia introduced him to a few people, only the ones she liked. Parker stayed quiet, polite, but never stiff. He didn't try to fit in. He didn't laugh at things that weren't funny. He didn't play the game. And that was what made him impossible to ignore. Later, they stepped out onto the rooftop terrace, away from the noise and the glitter. The city stretched out beneath them, lights winking like stars fallen to earth. Parker leaned on the railing. "So this is your world?" "No," she said. "This is my prison." He turned his head. "You could leave it. I'd lose everything. Would you miss it?" She didn't answer right away. "I used to think all of this meant I was winning. Now I'm not sure what the game even is." His gaze didn't waver. "Then stop playing it." She stared at him. You make it sound so easy. It's not, he said. But it's possible. She stepped closer. Close enough to feel the heat of him through his suit. You're the first person who's ever looked at me and seen something other than a Langston. He didn't move. I see a woman standing in a cage with the door wide open. She reached up and touched his jaw. And what do I do with the man standing outside it? He didn't hesitate. You let him help you walk out. She kissed him. It wasn't soft. It wasn't delicate. It was a collision of everything they hadn't said, everything they couldn't say with words. When she pulled back, her breath caught. His hands had found her waist without him realizing, holding her like he wasn't ready to let go. They returned to the ballroom just in time for the auction, and Olivia didn't miss the way people turned to look. Not at her, but at Parker. At the man who didn't belong, who stood tall anyway. When the final bid was called and the crowd turned toward the dance floor, Olivia reached for his hand. He hesitated. I don't dance, he said. You do tonight. She led him onto the floor, her fingers threading through his as the music began a slow, bluesy rhythm that echoed through the marble columns. He moved awkwardly at first, unsure, but she guided him with quiet confidence until his steps matched hers. You're better at this than you think, she whispered. I'm just trying not to step on your toes, she smiled. You already knocked down one wall. I think I can survive a bruised foot, he looked down at her. What happens after tonight, she didn't falter. That depends. On what? On whether you'll let me into your world. His jaw tightened slightly. It's not much of a world. Then we'll build something better. They danced in silence after that. Not because there was nothing left to say, but because, somehow, the silence said it all, and when the night ended, Parker didn't return to Queens alone. Parker adjusted the last hinge on the small bookshelf he'd been building for Emmy's room, wiping the sawdust from his palms as the smell of warm cinnamon drifted in from the kitchen. From where he stood, he could hear Emmy giggling, her voice rising above Olivia's as they worked together on something that involved a lot of flour and very little order. You said it needed 1 egg, not 3, Emmy's laughter echoed, followed by the unmistakable sound of batter splashing onto the floor. I said 1 at a time. Olivia's voice was breathless with amusement. This is what happens when you get promoted to head chef too quickly. Parker leaned against the doorframe, arms folded, watching the two of them. Olivia had flour on her cheek and a streak of batter across her blouse, but she didn't seem to care. Emmy, in one of Olivia's old T-shirts tied into a makeshift apron, looked positively triumphant. Hope you're planning to clean that up, Parker said. Emmy spun toward him, her grin wide. We're baking for you, Olivia shrugged, brushing a curl from her forehead. The kitchen may not survive, but the cookies might. He stepped forward and picked Emmy up, holding her upside down by the waist as she squealed with delight. You bribing me with sweets now? Yep, she gasped. Put me down. He set her gently on the counter beside the mixing bowl. You're both dangerous in here. Olivia handed him a spoon. Taste and tell me if we're dangerous in a good way. He took a bite, paused, then nodded. Dangerous in the best way. Later that evening, after Emmy had fallen asleep halfway through a story about dragons and Olivia had tucked her in with practiced gentleness, the two of them sat out on the fire escape with a blanket wrapped around their shoulders and mugs of tea in hand. She asked if she could call me Liv, Olivia said, holding her mug close. And you said, I said she could call me whatever she wanted. Parker watched the steam curl from his drink. She doesn't get attached easily. Neither do I, Olivia said, but somehow. This just feels like something I don't have to question. He looked over at her, the city stretching out behind her like a different world from the one she was building here. You're not used to small spaces. I'm not used to spaces that feel full, she said. This apartment has more life in it than my penthouse ever did. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. The quiet between them said enough. The next morning, Parker walked into work to find his foreman, Vic, pacing near the trailer with his phone in hand and a stack of papers tucked under his arm. You're not going to believe this, Vic said. Some corporate developer just bought out the entire block we're working on. They're pulling permits, rerouting contracts. It's a mess. Who's the buyer? Parker asked. Vic handed him the paperwork. Langston Holdings. Parker's chest tightened. You sure about this? It's the same name from that midtown complex you said your girlfriend came from. Vic said. I figured maybe she'd know something. Parker didn't say anything. He just nodded and walked away. That night, he waited until Emmy was asleep before he spoke. You bought the site. Olivia looked up from the couch, a book in her lap. I didn't, my board did. They acquire properties like that all the time. But your name's on the paperwork. My name is on a lot of paperwork, she said slowly. What happened? He sat across from her, elbows on his knees. The crew's getting pulled. Half of them don't know if they'll have work next week. Olivia's face changed. You think I did this to you? I think I don't know where I stand with you right now. She stood, closing the book. I didn't know about the deal, but I'll fix it. You can't just throw money at it, he said. I wasn't going to. He met her eyes. Then what were you going to do? She crossed the room, her voice low. I was going to talk to the board. I was going to make it right. Because I care about what happens to your crew, and because I care about what happens to you, he stood too. This isn't just about the job, Olivia. It's about what happens when our worlds collide. They already have, she said. And it hasn't broken yet. Maybe not. But I've seen what happens when people with power forget who they step on. She didn't flinch. Then keep reminding me. Hold me to it. I'm not asking you to follow me into my world. I'm asking if we can build one that works for both of us. He looked at her, something shifting in the space between them. You really didn't know? No, she said, but I do now. And I'm not going to let it slide past me. The next day, Olivia walked into the Langston boardroom unannounced, her heels echoing against the marble floor. The directors looked up from their discussions, momentarily stunned. She dropped a file on the table. We're not tearing down that block, she said. We're reallocating funds to support the rebuild. Small businesses stay, local workers stay. We're adding housing, not removing it. One of the older board members raised a brow. And who gave you the authority to redirect capital without a vote? My father did, she said. When he named me majority stakeholder. A ripple of silence followed. I'm done pretending, she added. Langston Holdings doesn't survive by flattening communities. Not anymore. Later that evening, Parker found her waiting outside Emmy's school with a paper bag in one hand and a quiet look on her face. I wanted to tell you in person, she said. The site's safe. Your crew's staying. The rebuild's happening with your plans. He looked at her for a long moment, then reached for her hand. You really did it. I meant what I said, she replied. He nodded, then looked down the steps as Emmy ran toward them. Daddy, she called. Guess what? I got a gold star. Parker lifted her into his arms, turning back to Olivia. We both did, Bug. Later that weekend, Olivia stepped into Parker's backyard, the one he'd been slowly transforming with salvaged wood, potted plants, and the help of a very enthusiastic 5-year-old. There was a string of lights overhead, casting soft gold over the handmade table where 3 plates waited. She looked at him. You did all this, he shrugged. I figured if we're building something together, we might as well start here. She stepped into his arms, resting her head against his chest. I like the sound of that, he kissed her forehead. Then let's make it last. And as Emmy danced barefoot across the grass, the lights flickering above her like stars, the 3 of them sat down to dinner not as a millionaire and a construction worker, not as 2 people from different worlds, but as a family beginning one. Together. Parker stood in front of the mirror in Olivia's dressing room, though she called it a spare closet, to make it sound more ordinary. The tuxedo fit better than it had any right to, tailored that afternoon by someone who'd flown in from Milan. He reached up to adjust the black tie, struggling with the knot. Need help. Olivia leaned against the doorframe, barefoot, her hair curled loosely around her shoulders. She wore a silk robe, the hem brushing her knees, and her face was free of makeup for the first time since he'd met her. Does this thing even make sense? Parker frowned at the tie. Feels like I'm being strangled by a ribbon. She walked over and gently brushed his hands away, her fingers moving with practiced ease. It's a charity event in a ballroom filled with people who pretend to care about causes while sipping $500 champagne. This is the uniform. He met her eyes in the mirror. You sure you want me there? I still don't speak that language. I do, she said, tightening the knot with a final tug. And tonight, I'd rather speak yours. Parker turned to face her. Then let's skip it. You serious? I've got a better idea. An hour later, Olivia found herself barefoot on a rooftop garden in Brooklyn, fairy lights strung between two battered chimneys and a battered record player humming jazz from a corner table. A blanket had been laid out near a low wooden crate, now functioning as a table, topped with takeout containers and 2 glasses of red wine. "This is your version of a gala," she asked, sitting cross-legged on the blanket. "Only one that makes sense to me," Parker replied, settling beside her. "No cameras, no speeches, just food that tastes like food." She opened a carton of noodles. "You bribed the takeout place with carpentry again, didn't you? I fixed their front door." They threw in extra egg rolls. They ate in silence for a while, the city spread out around them in glowing layers, the air cool and still. Olivia looked out at the skyline, then back at him. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "Your old life, before Emmy?" "Before all of this," Parker shook his head. "I miss people, not places. I miss my mom's laugh. I miss the way my unit used to give each other hell and still have each other's backs. But I don't miss who I was before Emmy." "Before you. I used to think being in control meant being alone," Olivia said. "I built walls so high I couldn't see over them. Then you walked in and didn't try to scale them. You just handed me a sledgehammer." He reached for her hand. "You didn't need anyone to break them down for you. You just needed someone who wouldn't be scared when you did." A breeze stirred the fabric of her dress. She leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. "I've been offered the position of CEO," she said quietly. "Full control, no more board votes. No more pretending to be someone else's daughter." Parker's brow lifted. "You taking it?" "I want to," she said. "But not if it means going back to that life. I want to keep doing it my way, investing in communities, building things that last." "Then do it," he said. "And if you ever forget why you started, I'll remind you." She looked up at him. "You're really not afraid of what comes with me, are you?" "I'm not afraid of you," he said. "I'm afraid of losing what we've built." "You're not going to." The next morning, Parker woke to the sound of Emmy's footsteps running down the narrow hallway of their new brownstone, the one they'd found together, halfway between his world and hers. The walls were still bare, the furniture mismatched, but it was theirs. Olivia stood in the kitchen, her hair pulled back, a mug in one hand and Emmy clinging to her leg. "Someone's very excited for pancakes," she said with a sleepy grin. "She's always excited for pancakes," Parker said, crossing the room and kissing her cheek. "But I'm more excited for you." Olivia held up an envelope. "Signed it this morning. CEO officially." He pulled her into his arms, cradling the back of her head. "You're going to change everything." She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "Only if you're with me. Always." 6 months later, they stood in a modest chapel tucked behind a restored historic building Parker had worked on. Emmy stood in front of them, holding a bouquet bigger than her head and wearing a white dress that sparkled in the sunlight. Olivia wore a gown with no designer label and no train, just clean lines and a smile that made Parker forget how to breathe. The ceremony was simple. No flash, no photographers. Just them, friends from both their worlds, and a promise that didn't need diamonds to shine. As they exchanged vows, Parker looked at Olivia with the same awe he'd felt standing in that alley all those months ago. She was still the same woman who had offered him coffee on a job site like it was the most natural thing in the world, but now she was his. And he was hers. After the ceremony, Emmy ran across the grass with her hair full of flower petals, laughing louder than anyone. Parker watched her, his hand wrapped around Olivia's as they stood side by side in the sun. "We never really had a first date," he said. "I'd say we've made up for that." He leaned in, his lips brushing her ear. "What do you want for our honeymoon?" She turned to face him. "A week without board meetings, a cabin in the mountains, and you in nothing but flannel," he laughed. "I think I can manage that." They left that evening in Parker's rebuilt truck, tin cans rattling behind them, Emmy waving from the backseat with a crown of daisies on her head. And as the sun dipped below the skyline they'd once thought separated them, Olivia rested her head on Parker's shoulder, her hand resting over his heart. They didn't need a mansion or a title. They had each other. They had Emmy. They had a life they'd built together, one brick, one laugh, one broken wall at a time, and they were just getting started.